A single mom accused of infidelity because of a failed DNA test and kicked out by her husband. Everyone turned their backs on her. The whole world mocked and shamed her for infidelity. When the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't just her husband who came knocking, it was everyone who once doubted her. What could possibly make a man who threw her out come begging on his knees? Stay tuned and watch the story unfolds. Maria stood in the soft glow of the nursery nightlight, gently rocking her newborn daughter in her arms. The pastel walls were covered in tiny stars, and a plush mobile spun slowly above the crib. Her world had changed entirely, but she felt full of love, of warmth, of the simple joy of watching her baby breathe. David had been quiet lately, more distant than usual. She chalked it up to sleepless nights and the pressure of adjusting to fatherhood. But behind his silence was something far darker, something Maria hadn't yet sensed. It began with Tony. David's best friend had visited a week after the baby's birth, holding the child with a stiff expression and offering comments that clung like thorns. "She doesn't look much like you, man," Tony had muttered, chuckling but not warmly. "You sure she's yours?" David had laughed at first, nervously, but the seed was planted. Over the next few days, David grew colder, shorter in conversation, distant during meals. He avoided eye contact when Maria tried to talk about the baby's sleep schedule or her healing body. One morning, he didn't kiss her goodbye. Then one evening, after putting the baby to bed, Maria found him waiting in the living room, arms crossed, jaw tense, eyes shadowed with something she couldn't yet name. "I want a DNA test," he said. Maria blinked. "What? You heard me. I want to know for sure." The words hit like a slap. Her breath left her body in one quiet exhale. "You think I cheated on you? You've been distant since the pregnancy," he said coldly. "Things haven't felt right." Tony, she interrupted, voice trembling. "Tony told you to doubt your own wife." "It's not just him," David insisted. "Something in my gut tells me I need to know the truth." Maria stood frozen, her heart pounding. "So you don't trust me?" David didn't answer. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "Fine. If that's what you need to feel better, let's do the test." The next week, they went to the clinic together. The baby slept in her car seat as the nurse swabbed inside her tiny mouth, then took samples from Maria and David. David barely spoke on the ride home. Days later, the results arrived. David opened the envelope in silence, standing in the kitchen as Maria watched from across the room. She held the baby, bouncing her gently, waiting for him to finally put the doubt to rest. Instead, his face darkened. "She's not mine," he said flatly. Maria laughed in disbelief. "That's impossible." He looked up at her, furious. "It says right here, Maria, I'm not the father." "There has to be a mistake," she said quickly, her throat tightening. "We should do it again. Maybe the lab." "No." He cut her off, voice sharp. "I don't need another test. You lied, you betrayed me, and you brought someone else's child into my home." Maria stepped forward, heart racing. "David, I never." "Get out." The words stopped her in her tracks. She blinked, as if trying to process what he had just said. "Get out of this house," he repeated, walking past her to the front door. "You can take your things.
I want nothing to do with either of you."
Her arms tightened around the baby, as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please, David, please don't do this. This is your daughter." But he wouldn't listen. She begged. He opened the door, and just like that, Maria stepped out into the cold night, clutching her daughter to her chest. As the door closed behind her, she turned around once, hoping, praying, he would follow, call her back, realize the truth. But he didn't. From the window, David stood still, his face hard as stone, watching her leave the life they had built. Maria walked away, confused, shattered, and holding the only piece of her world that still made sense. Her daughter. The house was quieter without Maria's presence. Too quiet. At first, David convinced himself he was better off, that peace had returned, that he had done the right thing. But instead of clarity, there was a hollowness that lingered like smoke after a fire. He filled that void with noise, late-night drinks with Tony, distractions, anything but time alone with his thoughts. Tony, of course, was always around. "Forget her, man," he'd say with a smirk. "You don't owe her anything. You dodged a bullet. You should celebrate." The only person who seemed genuinely interested in David, Other than Tony was Melissa, the nurse from the hospital where the DNA test had been processed. She had a way of touching his arm when she spoke, leaning in a little closer than necessary. Her voice was smooth, her laughter warm. At first, Tony encouraged the connection. She's got her own place, her own money. She's a woman who knows what she wants. And in David's wounded, lonely state, it worked. Within a few short months, he was dating her. Within 5, they were married. He told himself he was moving on, that life didn't stop for heartbreak. But even on his wedding day, something in his chest felt tight, off. Still, he ignored the quiet discomfort and focused on the fact that he wasn't alone. That illusion didn't last long. Melissa changed almost as soon as the ink on the marriage certificate dried. Her warmth grew cold. Her compliments turned into jabs. You never do anything right. Why do I have to explain everything to you? You're lucky I married you. She belittled him over dinners, in front of friends, even in public. Tony would laugh it off, saying she was feisty. But David could feel the shift. He began to pull away, to question whether he truly knew the woman he had brought into his life. The red flags he ignored now waved like banners. Late one night, David came home early from a canceled meeting. The house was dark. Melissa had told him she'd be out shopping, but the moment he stepped inside, something felt wrong. Laughter, faint, familiar, echoed from upstairs. He crept up, every step a weight in his chest. There, through the cracked door of their bedroom, he saw it. Melissa, in the arms of Tony. They didn't see him at first. He stood in shock, not moving, not blinking, as though seeing wasn't enough to believe it. When they finally noticed him, Melissa didn't even flinch. Instead, she got up slowly, walked toward him, and said coolly, "This isn't what it looks like." Tony didn't bother lying. He just smirked. "Looks like it's exactly what it is." David's fists clenched. "You lied to me, both of you." Melissa's expression turned venomous. "You think you're the victim here. Don't act like a saint." "What kind of woman cheats with her husband's best friend?" he asked. Trembling with rage, that's when her eyes narrowed, her voice dropped low. "Keep talking like that, and I'll make sure you're the one who gets dragged through the mud," he scoffed. "Are you threatening me?" But she wasn't bluffing. The next day, Melissa filed a police report, claiming David had threatened and assaulted her. False bruises, exaggerated statements, and strategic manipulation led to a swift legal case. The court didn't ask many questions. Her lawyer painted David as an unstable man, jealous, abusive, and dangerous. David watched his savings vanish, his accounts frozen, his home signed away. In the span of weeks, he was left with nothing. Tony and Melissa walked away with everything. He had lost his wife, his daughter, and now, his entire world. And all he could do was watch it collapse, piece by piece, betrayal by betrayal. The courtroom felt colder than David expected. He sat silently beside his attorney, watching as Melissa, now dressed in soft pastels and crocodile tears, recounted her version of their marriage. Her voice quivered at all the right moments. She described verbal threats that were never spoken, bruises that were never seen, pain that was never felt. Beside her sat Tony, acting as a supportive friend, nodding solemnly as if he hadn't been the man caught in David's bed with her just weeks ago. David tried to speak, to defend himself, but every word fell on ears already convinced. Melissa had filed first. Her story was clean, the evidence fabricated, and Tony's testimony, though false, matched hers perfectly. His lawyer argued back, but it was like trying to catch water with bare hands. Within an hour, the judgment was handed down. Melissa was granted full ownership of the house, both cars and 80% of the joint accounts. David was given 30 days to vacate the property. No appeals, no mercy. When he stepped outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright. It mocked him. Everything he had worked for, gone. Everyone he had trusted, gone. He wandered the city aimlessly for days. He spent his first night in a shelter downtown, curled up on a cot that smelled of bleach and exhaustion. He didn't sleep. His thoughts were louder than the traffic outside. Melissa and Tony were living it up. Champagne, parties, vacations posted on social media. He saw their photos on a cracked phone screen, courtesy of a shelter volunteer. In one post, they stood smiling in front of his former home. New beginnings, the caption read. Shame burned through his veins like poison. It was on the fifth night of sleeping under a freeway overpass that David started to replay the events that led him there. The doubts, the test, Maria's tears, her pleas for a second test, his refusal. He remembered the look in her eyes the night he'd thrown her out, not anger, just hurt, wounded disbelief. She'd never even raised her voice, and suddenly he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The test had been the beginning of it all. The nurse, Tony, their closeness even back then. He began to connect the dots too late, but he needed proof. With nothing left to lose, David returned to the clinic where the DNA test had been processed. He walked in with unshaven stubble, clothes worn at the seams, and eyes sunken with guilt and desperation. At first, no one paid him attention, but then a young woman behind the front desk recognized him. Her name was Rachel, a lab tech, who had been working under Melissa at the time. "I remember you," she said cautiously. "You came in for a paternity test, right?" David nodded slowly. "I need to know something. Did anything seem off about that test?" Rachel hesitated. Her eyes shifted around the room. "I shouldn't say anything," she whispered.
What?
"I saw something weird that day. Melissa ran the test herself. That's not protocol. Lab techs aren't supposed to test their own cases. It's a conflict of interest," but she insisted. "Locked the result room while she worked." "I didn't question it then. I was just new." David's heart dropped. "So she could have." Rachel nodded, her face pale. "She had access, and the system password. If she wanted to change the result, she could have." The truth hit him like a tidal wave. The test had been falsified. Maria had been telling the truth all along, and now she was gone, and he had destroyed everything with his own hands. The first nights alone were the hardest. Maria would rock her baby girl to sleep with one hand and wipe silent tears from her face with the other. In the quiet, she would replay every moment. David's accusations, the coldness in his voice, the way the door closed behind her like it never meant to open again. But sorrow could only last so long in the presence of a child. Her daughter, Lily, was her anchor. With every coo, every sleepy sigh, every tiny grip of her mother's finger, Maria found her reason to move forward. There was no time for bitterness, only survival. At night, while Lily slept, Maria began sketching designs, small dresses, rompers, soft baby hats. Sewing had always been something she loved, something she had learned from her mother years ago. With an old second-hand sewing machine and a few fabric scraps, she crafted her first collection. She named it Lily and Thread. She took photos with her phone, opened a tiny online shop, and posted on forums and mother groups. Orders trickled in slowly at first. 1, then 3, then 20. The reviews were glowing. "Softest dress I've ever bought. Hand-stitched with love. You can feel it." She worked tirelessly, packaging orders late into the night, folding fabrics around her daughter's nap times. As the business grew, so did her confidence. She saved every penny, never once asking for help, never once calling David. 2 years later, Maria signed the deed to a modest but beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood. It had white shutters, a blooming garden, and space for her to sew in the sunlit attic. Her daughter, now a curious toddler, ran barefoot through the hallway laughing, the sound echoing through walls that finally felt like home. Maria enrolled Lily in a well-regarded preschool nearby. She packed her lunch every morning with handwritten notes inside and kissed her forehead at drop-off. The other mothers at the gate smiled politely, but none of them knew the mountain Maria had climbed to get there. She never spoke about it. She never needed to. She expanded Lily and Thread into a full online boutique, children's wear, matching mother-daughter sets, accessories. Influencers began featuring her pieces. Orders came from overseas. She hired 2 assistants and opened a small studio downtown. And still, she didn't remarry. She didn't date. She had built a life from nothing, and every moment of it was woven with purpose. One Saturday afternoon, Maria pulled into the parking lot of a mall to pick up a fabric order from a specialty shop. The lot was busy, families coming and going, children dragging parents toward ice cream stands. She stepped out of her car, wearing a dress, keys in one hand, her phone in the other. As she walked toward the entrance, she spotted something out of the corner of her eye. A man hunched near the sidewalk, surrounded by silence as people passed him like he was invisible. It was the small cardboard sign that made her pause. Alright, anything helps. God bless. Maria's hand instinctively went into her bag. She pulled out a few folded dollar bills, careful not to draw attention, and walked toward him with quiet purpose. He didn't look up at first. His clothes were torn, the sleeves frayed at the cuffs. His shoes were covered in grime, soles worn through. Hair matted, beard thick with weeks of neglect. He was the image of rock bottom. She knelt slightly, holding the money out gently. "Here," she said softly. The man reached out with trembling fingers, lifting his head to say thank you. Then everything froze. Their eyes met. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It was David. His eyes widened in disbelief, mouth parting, stunned and speechless. Maria's hand jerked back instinctively. The money fluttered to the ground between them. She took a step back, her heart thundering in her chest. David looked shattered, not just by time and suffering, but by the instant recognition of the woman he had once thrown out, now standing above him, successful, poised and powerful. His lips trembled. "Maria's," he whispered, barely audible. Tears welled in his eyes as he pushed himself up to his knees. "I didn't know. I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Maria didn't speak. Her hands tightened around the handles of her bag. Her face, beautiful and unreadable, revealed nothing at first. David's tears spilled freely now. His voice cracked with shame. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." He lowered his head, sobbing quietly into his palms. The man who had once watched her walk out of their home, without blinking now, couldn't look her in the eye. "I didn't believe you. I let them lie to me. I destroyed everything." Maria turned her face away, staring out at the parking lot, trying to breathe through the whirlwind of emotions. The woman who had once begged him to listen now had no words left. She turned, walking back toward her car, her footsteps slow but steady. David's cries faltered as he watched her go, pain crumpling his already broken frame. His shoulders sank, the last flicker of hope dimmed in his eyes. But then, halfway to her car, she stopped. Maria stood still, her back to him, the fading sun outlining her silhouette like a portrait of strength. She turned her head, just enough to be heard. Her voice was calm, low and certain. "Get up." David blinked through his tears. She looked at him fully now, not with rage or cruelty, but with something far more powerful. "Grace, come with me." He hesitated, unsure if he had heard her right. She nodded toward her car. "Follow me." David slowly picked himself up from the ground, each step uncertain. The people walking nearby didn't know what they were witnessing, but for the two of them, this wasn't just a chance meeting. It was a moment carved out of fate, a turning point wrapped in quiet forgiveness and unspeakable pain. He didn't deserve her mercy, not after what he had done, but she offered it anyway, and that, more than anything, broke him completely. Maria opened the passenger door without a word. He climbed in, still silent, still shaking, and together, without another sound, they drove away. Maria pulled into her driveway just as the last traces of sunlight disappeared behind the trees. Her home glowed warmly under the porch light, its gentle cream-colored walls a quiet testament to how far she'd come. It was the kind of peace she had fought to build, and now, sitting beside her in silence, was the very man who had once shattered it. David didn't say a word as she turned off the ignition. His eyes remained downcast, hands folded in his lap like a child afraid of being sent away again. Inside, the house was quiet. Lily was spending the night at her friend's, blissfully unaware of the man from her earliest memories, now walking barefoot across the tiled floor, his frame hunched with shame. Maria disappeared down the hallway and returned with a set of clean clothes and a towel. She handed them to David without speaking. "The bathroom's through there," she said, pointing gently. He nodded and stepped away slowly, disappearing behind the door. The shower ran for a long time. When he emerged, the difference was startling. His face, clean-shaven, no longer hidden behind grime and guilt, looked older than she remembered, worn and hollow but real. He stood in the hallway like a ghost, unsure of his place. Maria motioned to the couch. "Sit," he obeyed. She sat across from him, arms folded, her back straight, composed, the same strength that had carried her through the years now visible in her every breath. David looked at her, and this time he didn't try to fake pride or hide behind anger. His eyes glistened with something raw, I don't even know where to begin, he said hoarsely. Try the truth, Maria replied calmly. He nodded slowly, took a breath, and began. It was Tony, he said. He started whispering doubts in my ear, saying Lily didn't look like me, that you'd changed. He kept repeating it until I started believing it. And then Melissa. Maria flinched slightly at the name. He caught it, hesitated, but continued. She was the nurse at the hospital. She was sweet at first, helpful. She offered to handle the test personally, said she'd make sure everything was done quickly. His hands tightened into fists, but the test was fake. They changed it. Tony and Melissa, they were working together. I didn't know until it was too late. Maria blinked, her throat tightening. David's voice cracked. I married her. I thought I was moving on, and then I caught them together. Melissa and Tony, in my house, in our bed. He covered his face for a moment before continuing. She lied, accused me of abuse, took everything. I lost the house, my accounts, ended up on the street, and even then I still didn't want to believe you were innocent. I clung to the lie because I couldn't face the truth, that I destroyed the only person who ever truly loved me. Tears welled in his eyes again. Maria, I'm sorry. I was blind. I was weak, and I let pride and manipulation tear us apart. She sat there quietly, her hands resting in her lap. Her face betrayed no emotion at first, only stillness. It wasn't just that you believed the lie, she said slowly. It's that you never gave me the chance to prove the truth. I know, he whispered. I begged you, she continued. I asked you to take another test. I told you something was wrong, and you looked at me like I was a stranger. He lowered his gaze. I did, and I've lived with that look in my memory every day since. Maria looked at him, long and hard. Then finally she spoke, her voice soft but firm. I didn't need you to be perfect, David. I just needed you to believe in me. Silence filled the room again. David bowed his head, shoulders trembling. And then, without drama or theatrics, Maria did something he never expected. She stood, walked over, and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. I forgive you, she said. His breath hitched, and for the first time in years, David wept not from shame, but from relief. And in that quiet living room, where heartbreak once lived, something else began to take root. Healing began to blossom. The next morning, David rose early. He had barely slept the night before, but for the first time in years, it wasn't because of fear or hunger. It was the weight of responsibility and the quiet chance he had been given. Maria had offered him not just shelter, but something far more delicate, trust, and he wasn't going to waste it. By 8 a.m., he was standing inside the warehouse that housed Lily and Thread, Maria's growing clothing brand. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, casting golden streaks across the neatly organized shelves of fabric, packaging stations, and racks of finished garments. It was her empire, built with her own hands, stitch by stitch, and he entered it humbly. She handed him a list of tasks without ceremony. Stockroom needs sorting, shipments coming in by noon, no mistakes. Yes, he replied quietly. Understood. He didn't try to talk much, he just worked. Every box he lifted, every label he printed, every shelf he swept, it was a silent apology, repeated in labor. Lily visited the warehouse later that afternoon, peeking curiously at the man she vaguely remembered. David knelt beside her with a gentle smile. Hi, Lily, he said softly. It's been a while. She looked at him cautiously, then at her mother, who nodded with calm reassurance. Slowly, Lily handed him a crayon drawing she'd made, a picture of a house with 3 stick figures. David's breath caught in his throat. Over the weeks that followed, the routine became steady. David continued to work hard, never asking for praise. He made lunch for Lily when Maria worked late. He stayed late in the warehouse to finish sorting when others went home, and Maria watched, quietly, as his actions began to speak. He didn't try to reclaim what he lost. He simply tried to earn what could be rebuilt. One evening, months later, the 3 of them sat at the dinner table. A soft stew simmered on the stove. Laughter filled the room as Lily told stories from school, waving her spoon in the air like a wand. David poured juice for her, chuckling at her wild imagination. Maria set down warm bread between them. There were no grand declarations, no cinematic speeches, just peace. Maria glanced at David across the table, the man who once let her down, now helping her rise higher, and he met her gaze, not with expectation, but quiet gratitude. The past hadn't vanished, but healing had taken its place. Together they passed the bread, shared a meal, and welcomed a new chapter, not defined by the pain they'd endured, but by the forgiveness they had chosen. A family, again, but this time, stronger.
If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.